I forgot how dramatic that is, man. It's like a cross between it's like a Ken Burns documentary, but directed by MacGyver.
That's what I was going for. Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to the Founding Feckheads. You might notice things are a little bit different. We're not wearing hats. I have glasses. Yes, in each episode we discuss a founding father and how he is actually terrible. Not he or she. It's going to be always he, and how he was actual terribleness personified. This week we are doing Founding Feckheads number 2, who is also coincidentally president number 2, John Adams.
Oh, I think I have a photo of him. There he is.
That's an actual photo, not a drawing, right? Can I ask for the source on that? Where'd you get that from?
I googled "sexy John Adams" and that came up.
Okay.
So he's working it.
I wish that had appeared in a pamphlet at the time. Okay.
That's worse.
Go back to the other one.
You don't like the other one? Okay.
That's actually quite close to what he looked like then.
Yeah.
Oh, look, go back. It's all right, isn't it? Like, it's not George Washington and it's not Thomas Jefferson.
Huh?
Yeah, anyway, we're talking about John Adams.
Mm-hmm.
John Adams was vice president under George Washington, so it was easy enough for him to move into the presidency at the 1796 presidential election. He was a member of the Federalist Party, aligned with the ideas of Alexander Hamilton in Washington, although Washington tried to keep things neutral. You know, when we talked about Washington the last time, the problems he had in keeping everything neutral. It was a bad idea to just disassociate himself from all the discussions, you know. That presidential election was particularly vicious, with all sorts of weird shit being thrown around by dueling pamphleteers and newspaper reports. He was painted by the opposition as, like Washington, an ersatz monarchist, completely out of touch with what was happening on the ground, that he was pro-British and anti-French during a very tense time with France, that he wanted to establish a system of aristocracy, and that he was intolerant of other religions in general and hated Catholics in particular. I'm not saying these things are true or untrue. I'm saying these are the rumors that were thrown around.
Right.
All the things the Americans fought a war of independence to avoid, right?
Right, yeah.
These knives were made even sharper when, under a truly bizarre provision in the U.S. Constitution, Thomas Jefferson, his main political opponent, as the recipient of the second largest number of electoral college votes, was installed as his vice president. In 1803, the 12th Amendment was passed, removing this stupid clause from the Constitution, and now a presidential candidate will usually select a running mate targeted at a specific demographic where he feels weak, where he or she feels weak.
Yeah.
Right? So I guess if you're like a young black woman, you'll pick an old white guy or whatever, right?
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Right. Lumped with someone he strongly disagreed with on almost everything, including the size of government, foreign policy, and civil liberties, Adams responded poorly, basically by excluding Jefferson from any meaningful participation in his administration. The rift between Adams and Jefferson mirrored the terrible relationship between the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. Democratic Republican is one thing, meaning one political party, right? It's not separate things. The Federalists over here and the Democratic Republicans as one unit are over here, setting the stage for highly partisan governance, which of course we can see last night, right? His inability to manage the growing chasm between the parties culminated in one of the most bitterly contested elections in U.S. history. This was the 1800 election. The strained relationship contributed to Jefferson's successful challenge in the next election, ending the John Adams presidency after one term.
He was a one-and-doner.
He was a one-and-doner, yeah. But he was something else as well.
Yeah, which comes to the next part of the script, which Lurie says, he was an asshole. John Adams was known for his difficult temperament and often abrasive personality. He had a strong sense of his own importance and was quick to take offense, leading to numerous conflicts with other founding fathers, or other founding fuckheads in this sense. Including Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, and even his close friend Benjamin Franklin. One of the earliest conflicts arose over a debate of how the president should be addressed in the weeks after the inauguration of 1789. Adams, who presided over the Senate as vice president, felt the office required a grand title to convey power on par with royal courts of Europe. He scoffed the fire companies and cricket clubs had mere presidents, and that Washington should be called, quote, His Majesty the President, or His Highness the President of the United States and protector of the rights of the same. To many Americans who had just rid themselves of a monarch, the titles were too royal, and Congress agreed that Washington's title should simply be the President of the United States. Opponents of the plump Adams seized on his titular suggestions to mock him as his rotundity.
Fair enough.
So here's some fun quotes directed at Mr. Adams. It has been the political career of this man, Adams, to begin with hypocrisy, proceeded with arrogance, and finish in contempt.
That was Paine. He had a way with words, didn't he?
Yes.
Not
a feckhead, a good guy.
Let's just have a look at that again. It has been the political career of this man to begin with hypocrisy, proceed with arrogance, and finish in contempt. Brilliant.
Yes. He is vain, irritable, and a bad calculator of the force and probable effect of the motives which govern men. Accurate in his judgment, except where knowledge of the world is necessary to form a judgment. That's Thomas Jefferson.
Jefferson again, yes. But accurate.
Yeah.
Never knowingly pithy, I think, Jefferson.
Yes. Adams was ridiculous, vain, absurdly jealous, embarrassingly hungry for compliments. Edmund Morgan.
Embarrassingly hungry for compliments. That's a fucking...
Yeah.
Yeah. And I imagine he was from everything you've written about him.
Right.
Yeah.
John Adams faced significant opposition not only from the Democratic Republican Party, but also within the Federalist Party. The Federalists were divided between moderate and high Federalists, with the latter led by a key figure in the Washington administration and leading Federalist, Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton increasingly clashed with Adams due to more aggressive stance against France and supported war, while Adams sought to avoid full-scale conflict. Adams' factions within the Federalist Party became openly critical of Adams, accusing him of being too moderate and insufficiently supportive of the Federalist principles. In 1800, Hamilton even wrote a pamphlet, which really intended for private circulation. I'm wink, wink, nudge, nudge, I'm sure, but later published by his enemies, titled Letter from Alexander Hamilton Concerning the Public Conduct and Character of John Adams. In it, Hamilton harshly criticized Adams as unfit for presidency, calling him a man of irregular and jealous temper. This public feud severely weakened Adams' standing within his own party, undermining his re-election campaign in 1800. The division contributed to the Federalist Party loss in the election and the eventual decline as a major political force in the United States.
Now, if you're wondering, how could a man who everybody thought was a ridiculous buffoon possibly get enough electoral college votes to get the president? All the people here are sensible politicians, and they all think he's a complete moron and a buffoon and a vicious, horrible person. And somehow he got enough. I would direct your attention to the last general election.
Yes. It's also worth noting that Hamilton was big at pulling the strings on George Washington. Yeah. Even though he wasn't directly in the cabinet for long, or as far as the administration of the Adams presidency, he had many of his surrogates in bed, still working the strings, so much that more than once Adams had to point out that, I'm the president, not Hamilton. So I don't know. Maybe I should have discussed this, before we went on. I don't know if Hamilton deserves his own, because he's definitely a feckhead, or he's just going to be a recurring villain because this fucker's everywhere and all this stuff.
Why not both? We can do a Hamilton episode and drop him in wherever we want.
Sounds good. Adams' relationship with Jefferson, his vice president and eventual successor, deteriorated significantly during his presidency. The two men became bitter political rivals with Adams because they weren't always enemies. They were actually dear friends there for a while. And Adams represented the Federalist Party, Jefferson leading the Democratic Republicans. This feud reflected the deep political divisions of the time and further isolated Adams. With what may have been the final wedge between the two has much to do with the same problem Hamilton had with France, which you're going to talk about next.
I'm going to talk about now. It's funny you should mention that, because I would like to talk about the XYZ affair.
Z.
Not
to be confused, not to be confused with XYZ, the prog band that almost happened with ex Yes members and ex Led Zeppelin members. There are bootlegs, so you can listen online. I recommend. Just saying.
Okay, say that again, but slower. What's the name of the...
XYZ.
And what's the track?
There's 4 tracks by it's X Led Zeppelin members, actually just one, Jimmy Page, and Bill Rutherford and Square. I can't remember his first name. John Squire, maybe.
Okay.
From Yes. So yeah, check it out.
Give me the title of one of their songs, if you recall.
Fortune Hunter, which became a song on The Firm, and Telephone Song, which later. Yeah, and Telephone Song, which eventually became a song on Yes.
Okay, thank you. I will do that. I will check that out. That sounds interesting. So I'm here to discuss basically supergroups in general, I suppose, with ex-members of other groups joining up. It was fun talking about John Adams, but now we're going to talk about 70s rock madness.
Yeah, right.
The XYZ affair. One of the first major controversies of Adams' I'm joking, I'm talking about John Adams.
Yes.
Major controversies of Adams' presidency involved foreign relations with France. After the Jay Treaty, which we discussed in our previous Founding Feckheads episode, after the Jay Treaty was signed with Britain in 1795, France, feeling betrayed by its former ally, arguably correctly, began seizing American ships. In response, Adams sent a diplomatic mission to France in 1797 to negotiate and avoid war. When American diplomats arrived in France, they were approached by 3 French agents, later referred to as X, Y, and Z, who demanded substantial...
I guess Tom, Dick, and Harry was too English, so they had to go with
Thomas, Richard, and Harold, who demanded substantial bribes and loans. Like, these guys just approached the Americans and demanded substantial bribes and loans.
I love that.
Les bribes substantielles et les loans as a prerequisite for negotiation, right? The Americans refused, and when news of this demand reached the United States, it caused an uproar, arguably also correctly.
Yeah.
Publication of the diplomatic correspondence known as the XYZ papers in April 1798 sparked a wave of anti-French sentiment in the US and calls for war. The slogan, "Millions for defense, but not 1 cent for tribute," became a rallying cry against French aggression. The XYZ affair led to the Quasi-War, an undeclared naval conflict between the United States and France. This affair
it's like the first Cold War, I guess, right?
Yeah, quasi would mean like almost. I guess it's a prefix, almost. This affair also bolstered Adams' popularity temporarily, but intensified divisions within his administration and the broader political landscape. This affair was one of the driving forces for Adams' next major issue. Here we go. Can't take an insult. Did you do that, or did you find it?
No, it just came up when I was looking for pictures of Adams. I was like,
brilliant.
Okay, the universe is telling us to use this. So
the universe is telling us to use this. Always obey the universe, right?
Right, go with it.
Here's another bit. It could be argued that the main and continuing damage done to the country by John Adams, the country of the United States, was the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798. Relations with France were very strained, and the feeling among... Can you tell that this thing was... this particular script was put together, the paragraphs were written separately and then put together afterwards. Okay, that's why this is happening. Relations with France were very strained, and the feeling among Federalists was that something should be done. These particular laws, however, were considered a direct attack on the Democrat Republicans rather than the French, as most new Americans, wherever they be from, signed up to Thomas Jefferson's party. These acts were in 4 parts, so we're going to have 4 different parts to this, and don't worry, it won't take forever. The Alien Friends Act empowered the president to deport any non-citizens he felt were dangerous to the United States. This act was never deployed, but many French people, mostly journalists and diplomats, left willingly when it was passed, judging the mood to be hostile, or at least headed in that direction. And that act expired in 1800. And this is
Don't worry, we're going to bring it back.
Well, this is another thing. You can sometimes the very act of saying we've passed this act is enough to scare people enough, and it's you don't have to. Sometimes you don't have to deploy it. Like a presidential executive order, it doesn't ever have to be deployed to have an effect, a certain desired effect. So if you say, "Oh, they passed this," well, it didn't have any. It was never, nobody ever was arrested or whatever. Oh, that's not the point. That might not be the point. Right. Anyway, 2. The Alien Enemies Act, after the Alien Friends Act, the Alien Enemies Act empowered the government to arrest and detain any citizen of a hostile country resident in the United States. This act was frequently deployed, perhaps most famously by Roosevelt, in Executive Order Number 9066, which authorized the detention without trial of Japanese Americans, the majority of whom were U.S. citizens, in a network of internment camps in 1942. That was the Alien Enemies Act. of 1798 that he used to do that. Some Germans and Italians were also detained without trial under similar orders. This act remains in effect as Chapter 3 of Title 50 of the United States Code of Federal Laws. It's called the United States Code. It's just the federal laws all listed out. The Sedition Act, the third one, empowered the government to arrest anyone who published false, scandalous, and malicious writing about the government, except the Vice President, Thomas Jefferson, an opponent of Adams. He wasn't covered under it. In other words, anybody could talk shit about the Vice President and it wouldn't be covered under the Act. In these times, scurrilous rumors and calumny in the popular press were common. It was part of the vigorous Overton window of participatory democracy, and targets were everyone. Even now, it can be difficult to tell where a completely valid criticism of government ends and a vicious, sarcastic takedown begins. If you watch any of the late-night talk show hosts, you'll see what I mean. It's hard to know where a valid criticism ends and a vicious, sarcastic takedown begins. How would you? It's not a legal issue. It's a matter of art. This act only criminalized those publications targeting the government. The most famous target of the act is probably Matthew Lyon, a Democrat Republican, i.e. Team Jefferson, from Vermont. He was jailed for accusing the government of ridiculous pomp, foolish adulation, and selfish avarice in a newspaper article. After his release, he returned to Congress, by the way. The act expired in 1800, the Sedition Act. James Callender was a controversial journalist at the time. He is best known for exposing the world to the hypocrisies of Hamilton and the Federalist. Jefferson supported Callender financially and provided feedback on early proofs of Callender's anti-Federalist pamphlet, The Prospect Before Us, which was an attack on the pervasiveness of political corruption, particularly among Federalists and the Adams administration, full stop. His writings set Adams and others in rage. In June 1800, Callender was prosecuted under the Alien and Sedition Act by the Adams administration. His trial was presided over by Supreme Court Justice Samuel Chase, who was later impeached in part for his handling of this trial. Chase, a Federalist, as was the jury, said before sentencing Callender, an attack on Adams is an attack on the people themselves. Now, that's a dangerous thing to say.
That's right out of Parliament. That's like British. It's like an attack on the attack on the King's men is attacking the king kind of thing, right? Or
like in the movie the Once and Future King, that when the king gets sick, the land dies. Yeah. Callender was fined $200. That's back when $200 was a lot of money. Callender was fined $200 and received the longest jail term of the journalists prosecuted under the Act. He was released on the last day of the Adams administration in March 1801. After his release, Callender and the others who had been prosecuted were pardoned by the new president, Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, and I think Callender might be a part of the Jefferson episode whenever we do Jefferson too.
Sure, why not?
There's more stuff there.
Well, like our main Jib podcasts, there's going to be a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
If you're a regular listener to all our Jib podcasts, some of the stuff you hear is going to be some of the stuff you've heard before. There's nothing I can do about it.
Yep.
The fourth one is the Naturalization Act. The Naturalization Act set the residency requirement for American citizenship to 14 years. This is perhaps the most obvious attack on Democrat Republicans. It was replaced by a better, but also terrible, Naturalization Act in 1802. As a response to these measures, Jefferson and James Madison each wrote a resolution that was later adopted by Kentucky and Virginia, respectively, specifically to limit federal power. They also said that states could ignore any federal law if those laws were outside the prescribed limits of the Constitution. Now, these arguments continue today.
Alrighty.
So
now we're going to talk about the poor.
The poor?
Yeah. Here's just like
Samuel Adams.
Samuel Adams, cousin to John. I don't think he was a feckhead though. I think he was a decent guy.
Well, if he set up a brewery, it can't be that bad.
Yeah. Well, he was one of the members of the Sons of Liberty that kind of helped start off the revolution. So, anyways,
I'll allow it.
Yeah. Thank you. Adams had a low opinion of the poor. It was often said that he was seen as an elitist who distressed the masses. Adams was deeply conceited, imagine that, about the potential for democracy to lead to chaos and tyranny by the majority. This fear led him to advocate for a strong executive branch and checks against the power of the masses, much like the Citizen Act we just talked about. While this was intended to prevent the instability, it also reflected on the destruction of popular democracy in a preference for rule by an elite. Adams believed in a government led by natural aristocracy of talent and virtue. This elitism is evident in his support of the property-based voting requirements, which led to political participation among the poor. Adams famously said, quote, "The people are quite as capable of vice as the great. They are prone to corruption and can no more be trusted without being overseen than a schoolboy without a master." This quote encapsulates, wow, I can't speak today, his distrust of the masses and his belief in the necessity of strong oversight by governing elite. Guess I could throw a picture back up here of him, so we're
there we go.
staring at him. Yep. Also worth noting his efforts to ensure that he would remain above the fray. He badgered the early government to increase the wages of both the president and vice president before he took office. The numbers, which I think I shared just before with you, the average person in 1790 made $65 a year, which is about $2,074 in today's money, which is just gross. That's insane. Adams, as a vice president, would make $5,000 a year, which would be about $174,850 today.
Yeah.
That's quite a disparity between, almost $180,000 versus $2,000 a year. Come on, the president, mind you, would make $25,000, which is about $874,250, almost $1 million.
Do you know how much the U.S. president makes now?
No, I did not look that up. I probably should have.
I'm pretty sure it's not 874,000.
Yeah.
It'd be like 150 or something. 150,000-ish.
Yeah. So the other thing to discuss, the Fry Rebellion. There was rebellions under the first president. There was also under Adams. The Fry's Rebellion, also known as the House Tax Rebellion, occurred in 1799 in Pennsylvania. The rebellion was a response to the federal property tax imposed
400,000 a year.
Thank you. By the Adams administration to fund the military buildup during the quasi-war with France. The tax known as the direct tax of 1798 was deeply unpopular, particularly among the German-speaking farmers in southeastern Pennsylvania. Led by John Fries, a local militia leader, I cannot speak today. The protesters organized armed resistance against tax collectors, leading to confrontation with federal authorities. The rebellion was eventually squashed by federal troops, and Fry's other leaders were arrested and charged with treason.
The early American government loved sending troops to collect tax, didn't it?
Yep.
Fuck me, man.
John Fries was sentenced to death, but President Adams pardoned him in 1800, a decision that angered many Federalists who saw it as a sign of weakness. Adams justified the pardoning by arguing that the rebellion was more a case of a local misunderstanding than a serious threat to the federal government. Probably right. Fry's rebellion highlighted the growing tensions between the Federalist government and the rural citizens, particularly over issues of taxation and federal authority. Adams' decisions to pardon Fry's further alienated him from more hardline elements of the Federalist Party. I mean, the biggest problem here is he just did not know his party. He did not work within it very fucking well because he just didn't work with others well.
He did not play well with others.
No. This is just probably not a shocker. He wasn't a feminist. John Adams held traditional views on the role of women, believing that they belonged in domestic sphere, despite his wife, Abigail Adams, who was kind of a baller herself, although she became a little bit of elitist wanting the money. She was also behind, hey, we need more money. But anyways, she wanted him to, hey, remember the ladies, quote, when framing the new government. Adams dismissed the idea of women's rights, including suffrage. In a letter dated March 31st, 1776, Abigail wrote to her husband, urging him to consider the rights of women as the new laws were being drafted. Adams responded April 14, 1776, with a mix of humor and condescension, stating, quote, I cannot but laugh. We know better than to repeal our masculine systems. Wow. This response reflects his reluctance to challenge the patriarchal norms of the time. Throughout his career, Adams did not advocate for the advancement of women's rights or the inclusion in the political process. His views were in line with the prevailing attitudes of the time, which saw women as subordinate to men.
Lovely.
Views on indigenous people. Adams' views on Native Americans were complex and often controversial. He did not advocate for the extermination or removal, but he also did little to protect their rights. He saw Native Americans as obstacles to American expansionism and believed that their way of life would inevitably give way to European American civilization. Adams' administration did not implement policies to protect Native American lands from encroachment by settlers. His presidency supported the expansion of American settlements, which led to the displacement and suffering of Native American communities. Dave McCullough wrote in his 2001 biography, John Adams, Adams harbored a, quote, dread fear of the British unleashing Indian war parties on the frontiers. In a letter penned to a friend, Adams called natives, quote, bloodhounds who let loose could scalp men and butcher women and children. So, I don't know. A little rough there.
Now we're going to talk about something a bit more cheerful, slavery.
Hey.
On slavery, John Adams was at least better than George Washington, who came before him, and Thomas Jefferson, who came after him.
Wow.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
That's the sentence says. If you didn't want me to read it, you shouldn't have written it that way, Seamus. You shouldn't have written that sentence if you didn't want me to read it out, okay?
You wrote it, not me. What are you saying? Go on.
I did. I wrote it, yeah. Fair enough. Here's a quote. I have, through my whole life, held the practice of slavery in such abhorrence that I've never owned a Negro or any other slave, though I have lived for many years in times when the practice was not disgraceful, when the best men in my vicinity thought it not inconsistent with their character, and when it has cost me thousands of dollars for the labor and subsistence of free men, which I might have saved by the purchase of Negroes at times when they were very cheap. Fair enough, right?
I don't know. That's not a very good answer. I'm sorry.
Sometimes you can forget about being good. You just have to be better than everybody around you.
There's a lot of confessions in that too. A lot of omissions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyways, go on.
In a letter to Adams, Mrs. Adams, who we were talking about before, I wrote down Mrs. Adams as a kind of a flippant thing. In a letter to Adams, Mrs. Adams said, I wish most sincerely that there was not a slave in the province. It always appeared a most iniquitous scheme to me, which of course it is. By this quote and others like it, Adams has done us a great service in response to anyone who would claim that everyone had slaves back then, or that everyone thought it was okay. The fact is that there were respected, educated people at the highest level of society who were repulsed by slavery for all the right reasons. However, he also said, every measure of prudence, therefore, ought to be assumed for the eventual total extirpation of extirpation means to take something up by the roots. Extirpation of slavery from the United States. But till it can be accomplished in a consistent way, let us countenance neither slavery nor the slave trade by introducing them into new countries to the West. In other words,
says the most powerful man alive, right?
Well, he would have the ability, yeah. In other words,
I'm just saying,
you're saying correctly. In other words, he's also, as well as not recommending slavery and being very against it on general principle, he is also not recommending abolition, but a cautious step down from the current slave economy. Now, this is something I've heard before in a number of different places and areas, but the one that strikes me is one argument put forward by Muslims for why Allah is not more stridently anti-slavery in the Quran. Is one of the things they say is, well, it would have destroyed the North African economy, right? Well, I think maybe if your God can't deal with the destruction of an economy, then you need a new God. This is a frequent response to any attempt to make life better for people on the ground. What about the economy? What will happen to our economy? I don't know, man. Something will be done. These are all logistical issues. They will get sorted out. You have to lead from the top, especially if you're the president or even a god. You make it clear that slavery is wrong, full stop, and it will get sorted out with far less fuss than you imagine. Like when gay marriage was legalized federally in America. All those state dramas just went away overnight and people just got on with it and have found a way to make it work.
So far, yeah. So far. Things might change, unfortunately. Fingers crossed, boys and girls.
Yeah, I think even Trump's cabinet are fairly all right with the queers.
I don't know, man. I hope so.
That's not going to happen.
I hope so.
There's too many gay people at too many levels of influence.
I hope. Hopefully
They can comfortably shit on trans people because there's not enough trans people in positions of influence.
Which doesn't make it right.
I didn't say it was right.
I know.
I said they can comfortably do it.
Sorry.
The fascist project defined a politically powerless, highly visible minority to shit on.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter who they are, as long as they're politically powerless and highly visible.
Yep.
So whoever the politically powerless, highly visible people in your country are, wherever you are in your country, they're the people who are going to take the shit.
Yep.
So good luck with that.
Set it better. Yep. Well said.
Nevertheless, his view of gradual abolition was shared by Alexander Hamilton and Benjamin Franklin and most of the early northern abolitionist movements, so at least he wasn't alone. In 1800s, Adams signed the Slave Trade Act, which made it illegal for Americans to have any interest in the foreign slave trade, including serving on any slave ships in any capacity, and that any slave ships seized in this manner would be broken up and sold off. Under this act, however, Americans could still legally own slaves, buy and sell them domestically, a practice which would remain legal until the 13th Amendment in 1865.
Yeah.
So that's delightful, right?
Yep.
Moving on to something else, a little meatier, right? In the final days...
It's going to be lighter? It's going to be less...
It's going to be lighter.
Balloon? Oh, okay, good.
In the final days of his presidency, Adams made a series of judicial appointments known as the Midnight Judges under the Judiciary Act of 1801. This act expanded the federal judiciary and allowed Adams to fill vacant positions with Federalist judges, specifically to stack the courts against Jefferson's incoming Democratic-Republican Party. The rushed and secretive nature...
Do they know that they're allowed to do that? Because
the
Democrats think that they can't do that.
This is part of the discussion.
Okay.
Are they allowed to do that as the part of the discussion?
Oh.
The rushed and secretive nature of these appointments undermined their legitimacy and led to accusations that Adams was trying to defy the will of the electorate in voting for Jefferson. Although Adams signed appointments for 16 new circuit judges and 42 new justices of the peace, some of these documents were not delivered on time. When Jefferson was inaugurated the following day, he cancelled the deliveries. And one of the appointments, William Marbury, sued the new Secretary of State, James Madison, and he was also the co-founder of the Democratic-Republican Party, to force him to deliver the documents, telling me I'm a judge now, right? The court found that while Madison's refusal to deliver the documents was illegal, it was also unconstitutional for Marbury to bring the case to the Supreme Court in the first place. And this established the precedent of judicial review, where the Supreme Court has the power to declare any law unconstitutional. This was new. Moreover, this is precedent. Everything in the early days is precedent. Moreover, by these measures, Adams did nothing at all for the trenchant partisan politics of the early United States, and he also set another precedent for an outgoing president doing some really shady business just before leaving office. Now, every president does it now. Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter. Any president when he's leaving office signs a whole shitty lot ton of documents in the last few days of his presidency, right? And I can guarantee you Biden's going to do the same thing on Thursday night, right? January 19, yeah.
I mean, some of it's just, leave a turd in the toilet and leave for the day, but these guys, they take it to another level. Also, so it's Mayberry, not Marlboro. John.
Oh, did I say it wrong?
John Hudson. It's not Marlboro. So.
Oh, John. Sorry, Mayberry. What did I pronounce it?
Marlboro.
Maybe you pronounce it Marlboro.
Marlboro is in like the cigarettes. So
maybe I don't know how you pronounce it.
No, you pronounced it right. I'm just having fun, John.
Okay.
So whether or not hopefully, John, you're laughing at this in the chats right now. see, John.
They call him Hudson. Hudson. Do.
All right, so there's our man getting old.
How old is John Hudson?
The election of 1800, also known as the Revolution of 1800, was one of the most contentious and pivotal elections in American history.
Again, the paragraphs were written separately and then put together afterwards in post.
It marked the first peaceful transfer of power between political parties in the U.S. from Federalist by Adams to Democrat Republicans led by Thomas Jefferson. The campaign was an extraordinary bitter one, with both sides engaging in personal attacks and political mudslinging. Like this was a thing from the start, guys. Okay. Yep. It was Adams. Vicious. Maybe with the Jefferson one, we'll go more into that. Maybe
it was a lot more vicious than anything you saw in the last presidency. I promise you that. And you can think about that. It was worse.
Yeah. And a lot of it was spread by James Callender. So
Yeah.
We'll have to discuss about how we want to tackle that. But it's interesting. It's fun stuff. Adams was accused by Jefferson Republicans of being a monarchs. Well, we're going to touch on some of this now. Being a monarchist who desired to establish a heretical presidency, which almost did. But anyways,
presidency.
yeah, I mean, sort of did, but whatever. While Federalists portrayed Jefferson as an atheist and a radical who would bring chaos and anarchy, he didn't do that.
That's fair.
But he didn't do it. He has issues. See the next episode of this. The election resulted in a electoral tie between Jefferson and his running mate, Aaron Burr, who is a fucking hero, not a feckhead. I mean, he killed Hamilton. What more do you need to know? Throwing the decision to the House of Representatives after 36 ballots. 36 ballots. Think about that. That's a long fucking time. Jefferson was finally chosen as president, with Burr becoming his vice president. The election highlighted flaws.
What does 36 ballots mean?
That they had to go through this voting in the House.
It means that he was tied or something. The vote didn't go through 35 times.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
They had to make all these concessions and shit. All these backward deals.
And start again.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The election highlighted the flaws in the electoral college system. Imagine that. Yeah. Leading to the passage of the 12th Amendment in 1804. Hey, we fixed it. Right? Reflecting on the election, Jefferson wrote in a letter, quote, "We are all Republicans, we are all Federalists," emphasizing the desire to heat the deep political divisions. I mean, you could write this fucking today, right?
Yeah.
That have been exacerbated by the Adams presidency. Adams' defeat in the election marked the end of the Federalist dominance in American policies, American politics. And both the 1798 and 1799, Adams issued presidential proclamations calling for a national days of, quote, solemn humiliation and fasting and prayer. In an 1817 letter to Dr. Benjamin Rush, maybe somebody we touch on, I don't know, because he's got stuff too. Adams wrote, "The national fast recommended by me turned me out of office." Adams argued in the letter, quote, "Nothing is more dreaded than the national government meddling in religion." And he believed that this call for a fast had become incorrectly viewed as a promotion of the Presbyterian Church, which he was not a member of, as a national religion, which caused an intellectual backlash. Yeah, John, that really must have been it, right? That's what did it for you. His decision to leave Washington, D.C. early on the morning of Jefferson's inauguration, avoiding the attendance of the ceremony, was also seen by some as a symbol of a bitter end to his presidency. I mean, what a fucking bitch. You couldn't fucking stay there and see it off. You had to be like, nope, I'm getting the fuck out of town. I'm done with this shit. That's just
summary.
Petty. Tom Petty.
In summary.
Yes.
Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. In summary. John Adams' presidency was marked by significant controversies that had lasting impacts on American history. His handling of foreign affairs, particularly the XYZ affair and the resulting quasi-war with France, reflected the challenges of maintaining neutrality while asserting American sovereignty. Sure did. The Alien and Sedition Acts, intended to protect the nation, instead became symbols of government overreach and repression, leading to widespread criticism and backlash. Internal conflicts within the Federalist Party, particularly with Alexander Hamilton, further weakened Adams' position. The Freeze Rebellion and the contentious election of 1800 highlighted the deep divisions within the young republic and set the stage for the Democratic-Republican ascendancy. Despite his many contributions to the founding of the United States, those controversies, sorry, that was a nice thing, so I didn't like it. These controversies have left a complex and often troubled legacy for John Adams. Many of his peers viewed him as an arrogant wanker, but to us, he is founding Feckhead number 2.
Number 2, dude.
And that is founding Feckhead number 2, John Adams.
Yep, and we'll obviously, we're going to return to our normal jib stuff here next week. In 2 weeks. But we will come back to the founding Feckheads. And
whensoever we feel like doing so.
Yeah. Which, if you want us to do it sooner, let us know. We'll consider it. We might appease you. We might tell you to fuck off. I don't know. We'll see.
We might demand tribute.
Yes, we might demand tribute. I like that. And obviously, it probably going to be Jefferson next? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe we throw you a curveball.
It'll be Jefferson.
Barry.
What?
Dude, you got to build up drama, suspense.
Oh, okay. It'll be Jefferson. Okay, forget about all that. You don't know who it's going to be. I'll give you a hint. It starts with a J, his second name. And he's on the $3 bill.
Really regretting my choices. Just saying. Anyways, yeah. Well,
Thank you for joining us.
Yep, you'll see us in 2 weeks, and it should be an FBI episode, and I won't tell you what it's about because I don't know yet. So,
okay.
Anyways, bye, guys.
So dramatic.